So, in case you're wondering, the tall, looks like me, just slightly older gentleman is my dad, and obviously my mom is here as well. And I was going to make a really funny introductory joke about them, but recent events have inspired me to make the joke about my wife instead. I kid. So when Veronica and I were dating and courting, and this occurred over about 5-ish years, we had a thing going where she was doing lights and sets and things for the theater, and I would go help her, and so she would be hanging lights, and I'd be handing her wrenches and giant theater lights and then things would get dropped on my head. And actually, I maybe almost died once, definitely got a few headaches, and also did some overly crazy things to impress her and her family. Because at least one of those shows, her dad was the director, and he said, "Chris, go crawl into that giant thing and start screwing it together." "Yes, sir," and came out filthy. Anyhow, but that worked really well because in that part of our relationship, Veronica is excellent at theatrical lighting. She can actually visualize the cone of light from the light down to the stage, where it's going to hit actors, how it's going to move. And so she can be up there on the ladder 30 feet into the audience and visualize the whole thing. And I definitely can't. Most people can't, I'd say. And that's one of the situations where, even though I'm the man, I'm doing the tools, we're in Texas, no, the lady needed to be the one doing the things with the tools because she had the talent, she had the ability to do it right. And today we're going to talk about the parable of the talents, and also a little bit the parable of the 10 minas, which is very, very similar. It's over in Luke 19. And the reason we have these two very similar parables is this idea of pericopes. And a pericope is this little unit of story. A lot of times it's going to be one of the parables. And what would happen would be Jesus would be doing his ministry, and he would use the same stories. And so by the end of the 3 years, the apostles have heard this thing, some variant of the story about 3 servants getting various amounts of money, and 2 good, 1 bad. They'd heard that hundreds of times. And then they go out and do their ministry, and they've been the one telling the story hundreds of times. And over all those tellings and retellings, all the sharp corners have gotten ground off. You have just this very, very tight, very efficient story unit. And so I'm sure that one time Jesus, or probably many times Jesus said minas, probably many times he said talents, probably many times he said livestock. The idea, though, that it's somehow some sort of weird disconnect. Well, Luke did it wrong and Matthew did it right, or other way. It's just you get these same stories over and over again. And in this particular story, we have the 3. There we go. We have our 3 servants. And the master is going on a long trip, so he's going away for quite a while. And he gives his 3 servants 3 varying amounts. One gets 5 talents, one gets 2 talents, and one gets 1. And the NIV probably says bags of gold, which is a pretty good translation. It's a decent amount of money. It's definitely not a little bit. It's a really good amount. And the 5 talent guy and the 2 talent guy immediately put the money to work. They go out and they make some more money with it, while the 1 talent guy buries it in a safe place. And then the master comes back, and they present their earnings. And the 5 talent guy and the 2 talent guy say, "Here you go, here's what I've made." And in both cases, well done, good and faithful servant. But then we get the 1 talent guy who didn't make any money. He hid it. And he's the wicked, lazy serpent who's cast out, and his is given to the now 10 talent guy, which is kind of an odd story again. We're not doing Judges because my mom's here, and all I had left was Samson and the Levite and his concubine, and don't want to tell those in front of my mom. But we're going to get into another weird story, and it's this one. So what here is a talent? That's kind of an odd thing for now. A talent is, in the Roman times, a Roman talent was about 70 pounds. And it was a lot of times it was used to measure silver. And it was equivalent to 6,000 denarii, the plural of denarii. The denarii is multiple denariuses. A denarius is about 1 day's wages. So a talent is about 20 years of minimum wage work. And it comes out to some number of thousands of dollars if you do a straight comparison, but that's hard to do because those times and these times are so different. So when you see talent, think $1 million. So we have a $5 million guy, a $2 million guy, and a $1 million guy. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. It's not quite to ludicrous, Bill Gates level, but it's definitely enough that these are highly valued servants. I trust you with $5 million of my dollars to go do something while I'm completely gone. And so these servants are the ones who are extremely trusted. If you're like a Downton Abbey fan, it's like Mr. Carson or the Bates. Really, really, really part of the family level servants. But we've come to think of it in terms of the English word talent, our abilities and our gifts. And that's very deliberate because that's what this story is really talking about, is the things that God has blessed us with. Our abilities, our skills, our spiritual gifts, our resources, our funds, time, opportunities God puts in front of us. All of these things are our talents. They're all things that God gives us that are valuable. And each of them turns out being given according to their ability. The 5-talent guy went and made $5 million more. He obviously is a pretty skilled individual. $2 million guy, he made $2 million, not too bad. And the $1 million guy was obviously the weakest link on that one. And so that's a really interesting thing. God gives us these talents and things that we can handle. And he gives these opportunities, things that we can handle, etc. And then we have the two sets of servants, the two who are the good and faithful and the one wicked lazy. And they're intentionally a contrast. And the good servant, what they do is they put their money to work. But really what they do is they invested in the people around them. They go to the market, and they didn't, buy a stock or a bond. They went and found somebody who needed capital for a ship that they were going to go fishing with. Or they needed just the confidence that somebody is willing to back them. Or they needed some sort of entrepreneurship. And that's who they invested in. Because back in those days, making money required one of two things: an incredible amount of work, or you already had a lot of money. And most of the people didn't have a lot of money. You think about wealth disparity nowadays, that's nothing compared to back then. And so they go out and they didn't just put it in the bank, they didn't put it in some sort of passive investment. They went out and they found people who were talented, who just needed that leg up. They researched them. How are you going to do this? Is this any good? Can you make money for me? And then they invested in them. And that's how they made their money. They went out to the people around them and gave them the benefit that they had gotten. And this means that the different servants took them to help other people to do. It wasn't just they did themselves. So it's very common for people with a lot of talents to think they can't give it up. They can't let go because other people, they just won't do it as good as me. And they get less done than if they just let 5 other people do a good job, just not quite the way they would do it. And that's what these guys did. And so in the end, it was like that scene in A Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, which I've never seen, by the way. I've never seen that movie. Where the run on the bank and Jimmy Stewart's like, the money's not here, it's in his house and his company and all this stuff. That was actually much better than I normally do for Jimmy Stewart. And that's the thing. This money that they were given was in somebody else's business, somebody else's herds, somebody else's work. They had gone out and invested in these people, and they were getting some back. And that's what we're supposed to be doing with our talents, is going out and investing in everybody around us to help achieve God's work. And it's very similar to, if you look in Acts 6, the early deacons. So in Acts 6, the widows, actually it's the Greek widows, but we're going to ignore the Greek Jewish thing on this part, say, hey, we're not getting enough distribution of the alms. And the apostles go, and this is just the 12 apostles, minus Judas plus Matthias, so back to 12, say, hey, we really shouldn't be wasting our time because we're the apostles. We have preaching and teaching and praying to do on this work. Let's just find some people who are good at it. And they go out and they get these guys, and they empower them, and they go and do good work. Or when Moses is leading the people of Israel, and his father-in-law comes and says, dude, you're running yourself ragged. Go get some of the elders from the different tribes and have them do the low-level stuff that you're just killing yourself trying to keep track of. It's this idea of it's a community thing where the church is not about me excelling, it's about us excelling as a group. And if you think about it, this is what the master actually did for the servants. The master had all this money. He could have gone and done the investments. He obviously was very wealthy. But no, he gave it to people who he had researched and he trusted who could do a good job, 2 out of 3. And so then they're just kind of doing the same thing. And our different talents allow us to help or to do in different ways. So a couple weeks ago, John talked about spiritual gifts. Those are some of our talents. We also all have the different talents we have. So 1 Corinthians 12, there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and everyone, it's the same God at work. And that's what we need to be thinking about here when we think about, well, I'm just a 2-talent guy. I'm not as good as a 5-talent guy. No, we're all there to serve God. We're all there doing kingdom work, and we're all doing different things. So, for example, I'm really good at talking, a lot. In fact, I ran the numbers, and I'm actually going to apologize now. The average length of my sermons for the past 5 weeks is 47 minutes, which, sorry, we noticed, I heard that, which is I get up and I can talk. I obviously talk maybe a little too much, but I can't get up here and play the guitar and sing. Trust me, you don't want that. I can't get up, and we were talking in the consistory, and Jerry's in there, and Jerry's did a wonderful thing. We were talking about a contract discussion thing, and he's like, this doesn't make sense. And he started really, really poking at one part of this that I hadn't done a good job explaining, despite my gift of talking, until it did make sense, so it was explained correctly. So this gift of discernment and the courage to say something, wonderful gift, not a thing I do. And none of us is better than the other one. The fact that I can't play the guitar doesn't make me not as good as John, doesn't make me better than John. It just means we do different things, all in the service of the kingdom. And we see this even right at the beginning of the early church. In Acts, we see Peter at Pentecost. He gets up and he talks to everybody because Peter's like me. He kind of talks before he thinks. And then we see Philip do a really impactful one-on-one. And they are equally valuable. And that's the fun thing about all this talent discussion is we're different, and God puts us where we get to do the different things. God puts us where I'm going to be in a speaking position, but not a guitar position. Put John in a guitar position and a speaking position, as it turns out. And that's a really, really nice thing because I got thrown into this, and I've had some troubles with it here and there, but I know it's not too big for me because God put me here. John, I've seen things go wrong during music service, and John just handles it because he's very comfortable and he does that because he has that same level of confidence where his talent is, and so on. Yes. And the other thing to think about is Paul. And I've said before, Paul's kind of my spirit animal on apostles because he is incredibly aggressive rhetorically. He gets in there and he just like drives the knife in and gets to the argument real fast. And in Corinthians, he goes through and talks about the different gifts and you need to do this and they're all God. And the very next thing he says is, but if I use this gift and I don't have any love, it's worthless. If I use this gift without love, it's worthless. And that's the other thing that's really good to think about here is, yeah, we have different talents. Yeah, they're gifts. Yeah, I'm really good at this thing or that thing. But I'm always supposed to be turning it to kingdom use. I'm always supposed to be using it for God, not for myself, not for other things. And the other interesting thing is that they all doubled, the two that were the good servants doubled their money, which one is huge. An investment, doubling your investment in maybe a year or two is extreme returns. But I want you to think about it this way instead. Just like the master invested in them, God invested in you. If you save one person, you've doubled that investment. And I think that's a big takeaway from that, because otherwise that's a really weird piece. And then the master comes back, and they immediately give the money back to the master. Now, if you gave me $5 million, I'm a slave in Roman times, 3 minutes after he's over the hills, I'm running the other way with my $5 million. Because, yeah, that's the way to go. And these guys diligently worked for the master with the master's money the whole time he's gone. He comes back and like, hey, here's it all back. And what the master then says is, well done, you good and faithful servant. You've been faithful. You did what was expected of you with a few things, and now I'll put you in charge of many things. And a lot of times we'll say something like, the reward for a job well done is a harder job, and it's kind of like, haha, moron, you know. But no, this is God saying, you did a good job with this littler thing. Let me give you something bigger so you can do it all over again, and it'll be great. And the last thing he says is, come and share your master's happiness, which means that the reward for this is independent of the doing. So the reward wasn't $5 million more dollars, or $2 million more dollars, or $1 million if the last guy had stayed true. The reward is something entirely different, which again for us is salvation and blessings from God. And we've heard of being trapped in a vicious cycle, the feedback loop where things go worse and worse and worse, like Judges. But God's telling us to get trapped in a virtuous cycle. We use our talents for God, we give the results to him, and then we're blessed by his happiness, are entrusted with more, and just do it all over again. And it's this feedback loop of better and better and better, kind of the opposite of Judges, which is really their story. But then we have the other half, the wicked servant, and the one guy who didn't risk his money. So there's a really interesting bit here, because we don't hear this part until it's the wicked servant. Master, I know you're a hard man. You harvest where you did not sow, and you gather where you've not scattered seed. And again, this is part of the master. He is an investor in people. He goes out and gives money to these people, these three servants, with the expectation they're going to do the exact same thing. And he's modeled the good behavior, he's modeled the moral behavior that he wants his people to do. But this servant was afraid of failure. He was afraid to take this money and put it at any sort of risk. So he did a completely normal thing for that time. He hid it. Yes, I'm not going to make money, but I'm not going to lose a cent. And that was being a good steward, right? He didn't lose anything. He didn't go out there and play the ponies, or he didn't find some weirdo who didn't do a good job. He protected the investment. But that's exactly what the master doesn't do. That's exactly what we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to worry about failure. That's going to happen. Even though the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom from Proverbs, what we need to do is risk it, because the risk is where the reward is. The risk is what God wants us to do, because he's going to bless it and guarantee a reward. So, yeah. And failure happens. That's fine. Failure actually happens a lot. That's perfectly fine. But you have to at least try to use your talents. I try not to make fun of my kids up here, because that's a jerk move. But that's a conversation that those two people had with me many times, and now I'm having with my kids of, yep, I understand your reasoning. You didn't do this because you didn't want to come to this bad consequence. You didn't even try. You have to at least try. And then maybe we'll talk about whether you should or shouldn't do a thing. Or contrast with the Pharisees in Jesus' time, who were so happy with being as Jewish as you possibly could be, but they weren't looking for failure. They weren't risking expanding the chosen people. They were just hiding the Jewishness in the small areas they could get away with. Like, I'm this, and I'm not doing anything else. Don't bug me. They were like the wicked servant, because they were not trying at all. And so what ends up happening is he ended up wasting the money. He wasted the talent. He could have blessed others. He didn't. Could have gotten blessed himself. He didn't. And so he's the wicked and lazy servant. And what I think is interesting is, and I don't know why, unless this has to be a God thing, is in that time, talents are used almost exclusively to measure silver money, not gold, not electrum, silver. Silver tarnishes if you don't use it. If you don't get it out and touch it and mess with it, it gets black and ugly and nasty. So I think what's being said here is we should be giving God back our talents all scuffed up and scratched up, but shiny, because they've been out of our pocket being used. They've not been in a hole in the ground. If it's tarnished, we've messed up because we haven't run the risk. We haven't gone out and tried to do something, anything with it. But because this guy did freeze up, didn't do anything, kind of like Gideon. Remember, Gideon's too timid. He has to get pushed and pushed and pushed. This guy goes too timid. The master says, you know the example I set. You know how I do things. You should have at least put this in the bank so you could get interest on it, so the bank could invest in people for you. And a lot of us have talents. A lot of us have talents that are not easily, hey, let's go out on our own and do a thing. Find a godly ministry and throw your talent at that. Yeah, it's putting in the bank. You're giving it to somebody else to use for the kingdom. That's fine too. The point is to use it for the kingdom, not necessarily being out in front and being the guy in charge. And then what happens is that servant is cast out into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That term shows up a couple different times in Matthew. And it's always in the context of you could have been in the kingdom. You could have been saved, and you failed. You had one job, and you messed it up. So now you're going to be thrown out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So we have, for example, Matthew 8, the centurion who tells Jesus, don't even come to my house to heal my servant. If you say it, it'll happen. And it's a Roman centurion, not a Jew. And Jesus says, many in the kingdom who don't believe will be thrown outside into darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But you've shown great faith. Or in Matthew 13, the parable of the weeds, master sows a field with wheat, and his enemy comes and throws a bunch of weeds in there, and we'll just let them all grow, and then at the end of the age, we'll separate them at the harvest, and the bad stuff goes in the fire, the good stuff gets saved. All who cause sin and evil will be thrown out, will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 22, the parable of the wedding banquet. Guy throws a wedding banquet. People don't show up, so he just grabs people from the street. And says, come to my wedding banquet. And he sees a guest, one of the guys off the street, not dressed up. So probably everybody was given clothes. He's not really celebrating. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And he maybe snuck in. He gets thrown out, weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then we get Matthew 24 with the evil servant who's in charge and is abusing the other servants. He's thrown out. So we get this idea of you could have done the right thing, but you just didn't. So you get thrown out. And we finally get Luke 13. This is the whole discussion of the way is narrow, entered by the narrow gate. And we hear the people who don't enter by that gate. They're knocking, they're begging for admittance. Didn't we serve you, God? And God will say he doesn't know them, and they'll be thrown out. And we get this idea of this is how you do things. If you don't follow my example, if you don't invest in others, then you get thrown out, thrown into hell, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. I think this is really kind of pounded home in the next parable, right after this one in Matthew, which is the sheep and the goats. Sheep go to heaven, goats go to hell, sort of thing. Those who didn't feed or didn't clothe or take care of the least of these go away to eternal punishment. And so we have this really, really strong contrast. The good servants who followed God's example, who had invested in the people, and who had been blessed. Well done, good and faithful servant. The wicked servant who had not tried, who had just been too afraid, too timid, and gets nothing, literally nothing. And the little bit of nothing he has gets taken away. And we're supposed to be going, there's obviously a good choice and a bad choice. Let's do the good choice. I think this is also aimed at the church. In the parable of the 10 minas in Luke, it's super similar. The biggest difference we want to talk about is the master goes away to be made king of another country, and some other people who he left behind send messengers after him saying, no, don't make this guy king, he's terrible. And it happens anyways. He comes back, does the well done, wicked, lazy, And then he says, and everybody who sent messengers to make me not king, kill them right here, right now. So there's actually now our three, our Christians who do, Christians who don't, and the rest. And this is not where you want to be. You want to be in the Christians who do group. Okay, I'm bringing my average down. I've only been up here 15 minutes. The other important thing I think I want to make a comment about is giving the last servant's talent or mina to the one who had the most, one who now had 10, started with 5. And this little less about who will be given more. And to me, to Americans in the 21st century, well, that's not fair. You took it away from him and you gave it the guy who had more. He already has enough. You know, it's like going and taking somebody's Chevy dealership and giving it to Elon Musk, because he already has a car thing and it's worth lots of money, less now. And, you know, maybe give it to somebody who deserves it more. But God doesn't care about ego. He doesn't care about the pecking order or about losing face. He's giving it to the guy who proved that he could do the best with those resources. God's all about getting it done right and getting it done well, not about, oh, well, it's not your turn, so you don't get it. Or, yeah, you backed off that time, so you don't need to, now it's your turn. Having said that, this is just one trip. This is just one interaction. The fact that the 5-talent guy got 5 talents, the 2-talent guy got 2 talents, next trip it might be reversed. Maybe the 2-talent guy is going through a time. Maybe he's young and just kind of learning all the business. So the fact that, at least right now, you're like, I kind of didn't get the sharp end of that stick, so what? It can change in the future. The important thing is whatever you're given to go out and use it and invest it. So applications. Number 1, don't be a jerk. That's last week, but still really important. So we're going to keep it here for a minute. Don't be a jerk. Okay. As far as this actual sermon, though, 3 things I think are really useful. The first is that God gives us many gifts, and they are valuable, and they're meant to be used for the kingdom. As you know, pretty much every time I get up here, I make you sit through a Star Wars reference of some sort. That's a gift. It's a very small gift. It's like a 10-cent gift, not a $1 million gift, but it's a gift. And that is, it's a really easy thing. Is there anybody in the United States at this point who does not know about Star Wars? So going out and saying, hey, here's something you can think about. Hey, here's something that you can make this relationship to. That's a skill. And I use it other times, but I do use it up here for the kingdom. Or, bless you. Or, and this is a really good one, Jerry pushing and pushing on this one point I didn't explain very well. That's a gift. Get up there and say, hang on, that doesn't make sense yet. We're stewards, we're elders. This needs to make sense before we say yes to it. You know, that level of discernment, that can be antisocial. Jerry's a nice guy, it's not, but it can be. And he's got that and he's harnessed it for the kingdom. And we had a great conversation and made the thing better because of that. And every one of these gifts that God gives you, no matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, use it for the kingdom. And you need to get trapped in that virtuous cycle. So last week, as I was putting this together, didn't have a great beginning of the week. And then about Wednesday or so, got everything together, and I've actually was doing really good, having a good day. And I realized I felt really good, like better than I have in many weeks, because at least for that little bit, I was in the virtuous cycle where I'd use the talent, and then I was feeling blessed, and like, let's do the next thing. And, you know, feedback, better. It's really hard to kind of jump on and off the train and to go anywhere. But if you get on the train, stay on. Get on that cycle and stay on. Then you get bigger, and more blessed. And that hiding or minimizing your talent is the absolute wrong thing to do. And 21st century Americans, this is the one we need to work on, because we believe in saving face. We believe in don't show weakness. Fake it till you make it. Don't go out there and have a non-curated social presence. All that really is hiding. Hide the risk. Hide the failure. Show what you want to show. And don't take any risks. You don't have to. That's that's what we're not supposed to do. We're supposed to go out there, warts and all, and be out there. Hey, I'm doing a thing. If John says, Chris, I'm sick, no one else in the entire church is going to be available. You're going to have to lead song service. I would do it. It would be hilarious, but I would do it. And yeah, I look like a moron, and that's okay too, because I'm out there using the little bit I've got for God. I'm not trying to hide it, not saying, no, I can't. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I was I was having a wonderful time with my soon-to-be wife, hanging lights and getting hit in the head with a 400-pound curtain rod. That actually happened, which is because her dad had said, Chris, we're doing Jesus Christ Superstar. We need more apostles. We don't have enough guys. Please come sing. And I said, no. I don't sing. I acted just enough to get through, and I'm out. I'm just doing tech. And I just wasted that opportunity. I wasted that talent. Maybe more importantly, until Wednesday, when I started feeling good about it, I had been praying, nothing go wrong. God, nobody get sick, nobody die, none of the stuff I don't like doing. Just, preach and lock the doors and make sure that nobody's broken in. And I was like, no, this is a big opportunity that I've been wasting for a couple weeks. To, I could serve people better than I have been. But I was minimizing the opportunity. And when you do that, you waste God's investment in you. If God goes to all the trouble to put somebody in your path you can witness to, and you punk out, you just wasted it. Now somebody else has got to step in and pick up the slack for you. Go out there, make mistakes. Be humble about it. It's no big deal. Everybody makes mistakes. So that's the message, I think, of the parable of the talents, is the idea of that virtuous cycle, and just do it. You won't do it right every time, but you tried. And that's the important thing to try and do, is just get out there and use those talents. Even if it's not perfect, you're not wasting the investment. Let's go ahead and then pray, and then we'll... I was doing so well, and I lost my train of thought at the very end. We'll go and pray, and then we'll wrap up the service. Lord God, thank you for the chance that we've had to come up here and share this message you gave us many times, it turns out. Thank you especially for the blessing of this church and these people. Help us continue to show you the world around us. And now, help us to pray as you've prayed. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.